Hello people and welcome to another Planetside 2 video. I hope you're doing good. My name is MattiAce and I want to start off with a little quick question here. Have you guys been enjoying flying since game update number 9? Oh my god. Yeah, I know. Anti-air was overpowered before game update 9 and then it got buffed. And it isn't only the anti-air. When it comes to maxes, unless the guy who is in it is asleep, if you run around the corner and you meet the max, you're dead right away. It's the thing that I don't understand about Planetside 2 is why all these weapons that are so easy to use have to be so incredibly powerful. That's the funny thing every time I bring this up about the balance and skill and all that, is that people always want to refer to a video called Balance for Skill, where a guy talks about, for example, the noob tube of Call of Duty. Basically, it's about how game developers are kind of trying to find weapons that are not based on skill, so that the lesser skilled or less experienced players are going to have a chance against players that are more experienced and basically just better at the game.
Get out of here.
So I'll give you a quick recap on some of these weapons that I've talked about in the past and some of my opinions about it. I don't like lock-on missiles. I think there should be another type of anti-air and anti-vehicle weapon instead of just lock-ons. Planetside 2 already have the mechanics for it. It is what you see in the AV turret and the Phoenix of the NC Heavy Assault class. Now, the mechanics of these type of weapons could be developed so that they are much more fun to use. Of course, they could be based more on skill, and there could be a balance between skill and effectiveness, and there could also be different types of weapons based on these mechanics. Now, when it comes to shotguns, I basically despise all of them, just as much as I despise the grenade launcher. But the grenade launcher is not that big of a problem in Planetside 2, I would say. But shotguns is something I have disliked since long before I started playing Planetside 2. In Battlefield 3 they were extremely overpowered at some point, and in Bad Company 2 all of the shotguns except one were completely forbidden in the Electrosports League because they were too imbalanced. In Planetside 2 shotguns are more overpowered than in these two games that I just mentioned. And then we have splash damage, and this is where I would say SOE has done a great job, mostly. Some of the weapons, like for example the Rocketpods that you see me using here, had this been done in the beginning of the game, that would have been a very easy kill. But nowadays the splash damage of the Rocketpods are very reduced. I'm using the Rocketpods because I find it to be the most effective way of helping the team in the most situations that I find myself in Planetside 2. Now, there's been a lot of other weapons, especially vehicle weapons, that has had a massive amount of splash damage that completely ruined the game. But SOE has fixed that, and I would have hoped that the balance between anti-air and air would also be going in the right direction. Unfortunately, with game update 9, I think it went in the opposite direction. So now looking at a video like this, it might seem like, yeah, oh, it's so easy to get so many kills in an ASF. And there are other pilots on both this server and on other servers that would do just as good or better than me in an ESF, but it's not easy. You need to practice and you need to spend a lot of time and search into your ESF in order to do this. But countering what I'm doing, that is a lot easier. It does not take the same amount of practice or skill to begin with. And it's kind of strange to me that people still consider rocket pods to be so I don't know, a lame weapon that any noob can use, because they really are not that powerful anymore. I mean, look here, I can't even kill a dead guy. I mean, sure, with the rocket pods shooting at this guy here, for example, it would be a lot easier, it would require less aim, but easy kills in any first-person shooter will happen no matter what. And reducing the splash damage as much as they did to the rocket pods, I don't disagree with that decision. I think it was a good decision. Now you can't even kill a tank from behind with one barrage of rockets anymore, so they have been nerfed even more. So again, about this video called Balance for Skill, that explains how important it is with certain so-called noob weapons. Basically, the argument is that without these type of weapons, a small elite of less than 1% of the player base would completely dominate the rest of the players, making the rest of the players get bored with the game and leave. But the fact is that in Call of Duty they were forced to reduce the power of the grenade launcher because it was so overpowered that people were really angry about it. And probably the next sequel of the series of Call of Duties would probably not have sold as much if they kept it as strong as it was. But what I find to be much more interesting about these so-called skillless weapons is one of the games, or two of the games actually, that are not brought up in this video. Those two games are Quake and Counter-Strike. If you look at the success and the player base of those two games, there is no denying that a game that is balanced for skill can be a very successful and very fun to play for a great variety of players. And yes, you do have grenade launchers and rocket launchers and shotguns in Quake, but they are balanced towards how you move in the game, how the maps are laid out, and how the other weapons are balanced. That's the thing about Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike was released in 1999, and it was only after Global Offensive was released that Counter-Strike 1.6 more or less died out. It actually isn't really dead yet, but the esports part of Counter-Strike has now moved over to Global Offensive, and that took, what, 12, 13 years? With Call of Duty they release a halfway finished game every year, and Call of Duty is just one of many games that have sold a lot of copies, even though a couple of months after the game release, a lot of people are still very unhappy with it. So now the main reason why I would prefer to compare Planetside 2 with Counter-Strike instead of Call of Duty, for example, is not because Counter-Strike is more similar to Planetside than Call of Duty, not in any way. There are very few similarities between Planetside 2 and Counter-Strike 1.6. But the thing that Counter-Strike 1.6 has is that it had a very long-term success, over 10 years of success. And Planetside 2 is not, as far as I can tell, one of those games that is going to be replaced every year with a Planetside 3, Planetside 4, Planetside 5. But instead this game seems to be one of those games that is supposed to last. I also find it really hard to believe that people will find it fun to play this game for a long time if there is no real purpose in trying to get better at whatever weapon you have. When every situation, in every engagement you are in, you can replace skill with some kind of imbalanced weapon that is just easier to use. And I'm not saying this only because I want air to completely dominate everything just because I fly a lot. Because then what could happen in Planetside 2 is basically the same thing as what happened in Battlefield 3, where the only thing that could kill a high-skilled jet pilot was another high-skilled jet pilot. I'm not sure if that's the case anymore, I haven't played the game in a while. But the problem was with the people on the ground is that they had no weapon that was worth getting good at to counter jets. Instead, the effectiveness of anti-air was only decided by how the developers of the game wanted it to be, and not in any way by the player who was using it. And then the result will be one of two things. Either anti-air is overpowered, and basically anybody can counter a high-skilled pilot just because you have access to a certain weapon. Or it's underpowered, and regardless how much you practice with your anti-air weapon, it will not be effective enough, because practicing with this weapon means nothing because it's not a skill-based weapon. And this is one of the problems that we see here where you don't have weapons that are balanced for skill. Is that the effectiveness of the weapon is not in any way decided by who is using it. So then as an infantry player, the only thing you can do when you're playing on a map that has aircraft is that you can try to avoid the aircraft and just hope that they don't see you, and that's basically it. Now if there was some balance between air and ground, you would have some really good fights between air and ground, based on the player experience, player skill, and tactics and some such. Right now what we see in Planetside 2 is whether or not a team can actually spawn anti-air, not so much about how well you can use it. So now the best example I can come up with that has a balance between air and anti-air is actually from the game Battlefield Bad Company 2, where you have a helicopter that takes a certain amount of skill to be good at, and then you can counter it with a certain type of weapon called AT-4. Now this is not in any way a perfect example of balance between air and anti-air, but it's the best example I have. And I think it ended up being balanced just randomly, because the 84 wasn't really an anti-air rocket launcher, it was an anti-vehicle rocket launcher. It just happened to be even, or relatively even, in terms of how much skill you needed to use that rocket launcher compared to how much skill you needed to be good at flying. Where's the thing about flying in a lot of different games and countering aircrafts in the same amount of games is that normally it will always take a lot of time and effort to learn how to fly and be a good pilot. But countering a good pilot is more or less just about having access to a certain type of weapon. Another suggestion I really want to make is that it's not even my suggestion, it was somebody that posted this on one of my Reddit posts, is that we should have a couple of points that you could actually capture with an aircraft. Not that only aircrafts could capture them, but that aircrafts actually had a point to fight over. So what I would like to see there is like maybe a couple of high towers or something that were actually accessible from air and that you could capture while being in an aircraft, which could lead to some really fun air combat situations. So I'm pretty sure that the discussion between air and anti-air is gonna go on for a long time, and I will most likely be part of it in the future as well. Please let me know what you think, and thank you so much for watching. So bye for now.